Security grabbed my badge while champagne corks popped 15 feet away. "She'll clean up your disaster," the VP announced, raising his glass toward my replacement, a woman half my age who'd never touched a live diagnostic system in her career. I watched through the glass doors as they celebrated my exit like a company holiday. 11 years. 4,000 patients whose lives depended on the monitoring system I designed from nothing, gone in the time it takes to finish a sparkling water. My husband Marcus picked me up from the parking garage that afternoon. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The shock hadn't worn off yet. But here's what they didn't realize. That safety protocol everyone ignored, the one I begged them to understand for 3 years straight, I engineered it to require something very specific before it would authorize critical functions. 72 hours later, my replacement discovered what that something was. She called me 31 times that weekend. I watched every single call light up my phone, and I never picked up once. My name is Megan Hollister. I'm 36 years old, married to my best friend Marcus for 8 years, and until recently, I was the lead systems architect at MedCore Diagnostics, one of the largest patient monitoring technology firms on the Eastern Seaboard. This is the story of how they humiliated me on my way out the door, and why they came crawling back before the weekend was over. Now, before I tell you exactly what happened when that system locked her out, and trust me, the panic in her voicemails was something else entirely, let me ask you something real quick. If you've ever poured everything into a job only to have someone dismiss your work like it meant nothing, if you've ever been replaced by someone who had no clue what they were walking into, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this channel, we share stories of people who got knocked down and came back stronger than anyone expected. We're building something here. A community of people who understand that your career doesn't define your worth. So if you're one of the first 1,000 subscribers, welcome to the foundation. You're part of something special. Now, let me tell you about the 72 hours that brought MedCore Diagnostics to its knees. I need to take you back to where this actually started. Fresh out of graduate school with a master's in biomedical engineering, I joined MedCore when they were still operating from a converted warehouse space. 12 employees total. No HR department, no fancy titles. Just a group of people trying to build something that mattered. Dr. Patricia Vance founded the company after losing her mother to a monitoring failure at a hospital. The equipment missed warning signs. Her mother coded, and nobody caught it until it was too late. Patricia wanted to build systems that never missed anything. That mission resonated with everything I believed about technology and healthcare. For the first 5 years, I worked alongside Patricia and our small team building the CoreWatch system from scratch. This wasn't just software sitting on top of existing hardware. We designed the entire architecture, the sensors, the algorithms, the alert protocols, everything. I handled the safety integration specifically. See, patient monitoring isn't like other technology. When your phone crashes, you restart it. When a monitoring system crashes, someone might die. The stakes shaped everything about how I approached my work. I built redundancy layers into every critical function, backup systems for the backups, fail-safe protocols that would trigger even if the primary system went completely dark. Patricia called me the guardian of the system. She trusted my judgment completely. By year 7, MedCore had grown to over 200 employees. We'd expanded into a proper office building. Our systems were installed in 43 hospitals across 9 states. That's when things started shifting in ways I didn't fully recognize at first. Patricia stepped back from daily operations. She'd remarried, had a child later in life, and wanted to spend more time with her family. Understandable. She'd earned that peace. But her departure created a vacuum that got filled with people who saw MedCore differently than she did. Robert Kessler became our new VP of Operations. Robert came from a consumer electronics background. He'd spent 15 years selling devices that became obsolete every 18 months. His entire worldview centered on moving fast, cutting costs, and capturing market share. Healthcare technology requires a completely different mindset. I tried explaining this to him during our first meeting. Patient safety systems need extensive validation periods. You can't rush updates to live hospital equipment the way you'd push a phone app update. He nodded along while checking his watch. That should have told me everything I needed to know. Over the next 2 years, Robert systematically dismantled the culture Patricia had built. Cost-cutting became the dominant priority. He eliminated positions he considered redundant, including 2 of my best safety engineers. He pushed for faster development cycles despite my warnings about quality control. I documented every concern formally, emails with read receipts, meeting notes filed properly. I wasn't naive about protecting myself, but documentation doesn't protect you from someone determined to remove you. Robert and I clashed repeatedly over the safety protocol updates. He wanted to simplify user authentication to make the system more convenient for hospital staff. I understood convenience mattered, but I refused to compromise the fundamental security architecture. "Megan, you're creating obstacles where none need to exist," he told me once. "Our competitors aren't building these elaborate authentication layers. They're winning contracts while we're still testing. Our competitors haven't had a single system installed for more than 3 years. When something fails catastrophically, and it will, those contracts won't matter much." He didn't appreciate that perspective. Meanwhile, my personal life was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. Marcus and I had celebrated our 7th anniversary that spring. We'd finally bought our first house, a small craftsman with a garden I'd always dreamed about. Sunday mornings meant coffee on the back porch, planning what we'd plant when the weather warmed. I'd been so focused on my career for years that I'd forgotten how much I needed balance. Marcus worked as a high school history teacher. Watching him come home energized by his students reminded me that work could be fulfilling without being all-consuming. "You seem different lately," he observed one evening, lighter somehow. "I'm trying to care less about things I can't control," I admitted. What I didn't tell him was that my position at MedCorp felt increasingly unstable. Robert had started excluding me from leadership meetings. Projects I'd overseen for years were being reassigned without explanation. The writing was on the wall. I just didn't want to read it yet.
3 weeks before my termination, Robert introduced someone during our monthly all-hands meeting. "Everyone, please welcome Chelsea Morrison. She's joining us as Deputy Systems Director and will be working closely with our technical teams." Chelsea stood at the front of the room looking polished in ways I'd never mastered. Perfect hair, designer clothes, the kind of confidence that comes from never having been seriously challenged. She was 28 years old with 6 years of experience, all of it in financial software development, 0 healthcare background, no patient safety certifications. Robert was positioning her as my replacement before anyone officially acknowledged what was happening. I scheduled a meeting with him that afternoon. "Robert, can we discuss Chelsea's role and how it intersects with my responsibilities?" He leaned back in his chair. "Megan, Chelsea brings fresh perspective. She's not weighed down by legacy thinking like some of our longer-tenured staff." Legacy thinking. 11 years of protecting patient lives reduced to legacy thinking? "The safety protocols I've developed aren't outdated," I said carefully. "They reflect lessons learned from real-world implementation across dozens of hospitals." "Maybe that's precisely the problem. You're so attached to how things have been done that you can't see how they should be done." The conversation went nowhere productive. I left his office knowing my days were numbered. That night, I told Marcus everything. We sat on our porch while the sun went down, and I finally let myself acknowledge what I'd been avoiding. "I think they're going to fire me." He reached for my hand. "What do you need right now?" Not, "What should we do?" Not, "Let me fix this for you." Just, "What do you need?" I married the right person. "I need to make sure the hospitals stay safe," I said. "Whatever happens to me, patients need to be protected." The next morning, I went to work with a different mindset. I spent the following 3 weeks ensuring every critical system had documentation that any competent engineer could follow. I verified backup protocols were functioning properly. I tested fail-safe measures that hadn't been validated in months. And I did one more thing. The master safety protocol, the one that governed emergency shutdown and restart procedures, required biometric authentication from authorized personnel. I was the only person at MedCorp with full administrative access to that protocol. Not because I was hoarding power, because nobody else had completed the security clearance requirements. Robert had deprioritized those certifications as a cost-saving measure 2 years ago. I'd flagged this vulnerability repeatedly. I'd sent emails documenting the risk of having a single point of authentication for critical safety functions. Every email went unanswered. So when they came for me, the situation was exactly as I'd warned them. Friday afternoon, 2:45. Robert appeared at my office door with Chelsea and a security guard named Dennis, who'd been with the company almost as long as I had. Dennis couldn't look me in the eye. "Megan, we're making some organizational changes. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately." No warning, no conversation, no opportunity to transition my work properly. Robert handed me a folder containing standard termination documents, my final paycheck, COBRA information, a non-disparagement clause they wanted me to sign. "Dennis will escort you to gather personal belongings. Please surrender your badge and company devices before leaving the building." I stood slowly. Everything felt surreal, like watching myself outside my body. "Robert, the safety protocols require my authentication for emergency functions. You need to establish alternate authorization before I leave." He waved dismissively. "Chelsea will handle all of that. She's been studying your systems for weeks." I looked at Chelsea. She smiled the way people smile when they think they've already won. "I'm sure I'll figure it out," she said. Dennis walked me to my office. The conference room across the hall was decorated with streamers and balloons. A catering setup covered the main table. Champagne bottles lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. My replacement was getting a welcome party, while security escorted me out. The cruelty of it took my breath away. I gathered my things methodically: personal photos, the small plant Marcus had given me 5 years ago, a card from the nursing staff at Memorial Hospital, thanking our team for catching a monitoring error that saved a patient's life. 11 years compressed into one cardboard box. As Dennis walked me toward the exit, I passed the conference room. Robert noticed me through the glass. He raised his champagne flute and mouthed something to his inner circle. They laughed. I kept walking. Marcus was waiting in the parking garage. I'd texted him when the security guard appeared. He'd left school immediately. "I'm so sorry, Meg." I climbed into the passenger seat and finally let myself breathe. "Take me home." We drove in silence. Marcus knew better than to push me toward conversation before I was ready. The first tears came when we pulled into our driveway. Not because I'd lost my job, because I'd lost the mission that had given my work meaning for more than a decade. I genuinely believed I was protecting people, and they'd thrown a party for the person replacing me. Saturday morning arrived gray and quiet. Marcus made pancakes while I sat at our kitchen table staring at my phone. No messages from anyone at MedCorp, not even the colleagues I'd considered friends. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked. "I'm thinking about all the things that could go wrong if Chelsea doesn't understand the safety architecture. Isn't that their problem now?" He wasn't wrong, it was their problem. They'd created the situation deliberately. Whatever consequences followed belonged entirely to them. But the hospitals didn't create this situation. The patients didn't create it. "I keep imagining some nurse relying on our system during an emergency," I said, "and the system failing because someone who doesn't understand it made changes they shouldn't have." Marcus set a plate in front of me. "You documented everything. You warned them repeatedly. You did your job." "I know. So maybe this weekend your job is taking care of yourself." I tried. I really tried. We went for a long walk through our neighborhood. I started reading a novel I'd been putting off for months.
Marcus suggested we try the new Thai restaurant downtown for dinner. Normal Saturday things. Around 8 that evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. Same number. And again. By the 4th call, I checked the voicemail. Chelsea's voice strained in a way I hadn't heard from her before. "Megan, this is Chelsea Morrison. I need to speak with you urgently. Please call me back as soon as possible." I showed Marcus the phone. "Are you going to call her?" I thought about Robert's champagne toast, Chelsea's confident smile, the streamers and balloons celebrating my humiliation. Not tonight.
Sunday morning brought 17 more missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic voicemails. "Megan, please, we have a situation with the Core Watch system. I can't access the emergency protocols. Please call me back." "This is urgent. Hospital administrators are calling. Something's happening with the monitoring systems and I can't. Please just call me." "I've tried everything. The authentication won't accept my credentials. Robert says only you have the access. Please, Megan, people could be at risk." That last one made me pause. I'd built those safety protocols specifically to prevent unauthorized changes during my absence. The system was functioning exactly as designed. Nothing was failing. Chelsea simply couldn't override the safeguards, which meant Robert had put someone in charge who literally couldn't perform critical safety functions. Marcus watched me listening to the messages. "What's happening?" "They locked themselves out. The system requires my biometric authentication for emergency protocol changes. I told them this would happen. I documented the risk dozens of times." So what are they actually dealing with? I thought through the possibilities. Probably nothing catastrophic yet. The existing protocols are solid. But if any hospital needs emergency configuration changes, Chelsea can't authorize them. Is that dangerous? It could be, eventually. My phone buzzed again, Robert's personal number this time. I declined the call. "Megan, can I ask you something?" Marcus said carefully. "Go ahead." "What would make you feel good about how this ends?" I didn't have an immediate answer. Part of me wanted them to suffer the consequences of their arrogance. Part of me couldn't stand the thought of patients being affected by leadership failures they had nothing to do with. I don't know yet. That's okay. You don't have to decide right now. But the calls kept coming. By Sunday afternoon, my voicemail was full. Monday morning, I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined monitoring screens going dark in hospital rooms, patients whose conditions went unnoticed because the system couldn't adapt. Rationally, I knew the likelihood was small. The existing protocols were robust. Nothing would fail immediately. But healthcare systems exist for worst-case scenarios, and worst cases don't wait for convenient timing. My phone showed 31 missed calls total, voicemails I couldn't bring myself to delete. Around 9, my doorbell rang. Patricia Vance stood on my porch, the woman who'd founded MedCore, who'd built the company after losing her mother, who'd trusted me to be the guardian of her vision. She looked older than I remembered, tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat in my living room, the space Marcus and I had decorated together, filled with books and photos and evidence of a life built carefully over years. I heard what happened. Several hospital administrators called me directly when they couldn't reach anyone useful at MedCore. "I'm surprised anyone still has your number." "I'm surprised Robert didn't change it." She almost smiled. "Megan, I need to apologize. You didn't fire me." "No, but I left you in an impossible situation. I knew Robert's priorities didn't align with the company's original mission. I chose to ignore it because stepping back was easier than fighting." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me had resented her absence these past few years.
Part of me understood completely. What's happening at the hospitals right now? So far, nothing critical. The systems are stable, but 3 facilities have flagged issues they need addressed, configuration changes that require the administrative access Chelsea can't provide. Robert knows only my biometrics are authorized. He does now, he didn't bother understanding it before. Classic Robert.
Patricia continued, I've spent the last 12 hours in meetings with the board. Robert is being removed from his position effective immediately. I hadn't expected that. What about Chelsea? She's been reassigned to a role more appropriate for her experience level, away from safety-critical systems. The champagne party was already ancient history. Patricia, why are you here? She leaned forward. Because I need to ask you for something I have no right to request. The authentication access? Yes, but not just that. She paused. Megan, I want you to come back. Not to your old position, to a new one. Chief Safety Officer, reporting directly to me. I'm returning to active leadership. The offer hung in the air between us. Everything I'd wanted was suddenly possible. Vindication, authority, the chance to protect what I'd built. But something had shifted in me over the past 72 hours. Patricia, can I be honest with you? Please. I've given 11 years to MedCorps. I've fought battles that no one else wanted to fight. I've sacrificed time with my husband, weekends, holidays, all because I believed in what we were building. I know. When they escorted me out on Friday, I had to walk past my own replacement's welcome party. They celebrated my removal like a victory. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. I'm sorry. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I need you to understand. I can't just walk back in like none of that happened. What would you need to consider returning? I thought about Marcus's question from the day before. What would make me feel good about how this ends? 3 things, I said finally. I'm listening. First, I want a formal apology from the company, public acknowledgement that my termination was handled improperly. Not for my ego, for the record. Done. Second, I want the safety engineering positions Robert eliminated to be restored. Those roles existed for good reasons. Also done. Third, I paused. I want the hospitals to know what happened, not the details of the internal politics, but they need to understand that their systems were put at risk by leadership decisions, and that I refuse to leave them vulnerable. They deserve to know who was actually protecting them. Patricia considered this carefully. That's a significant request. It could affect our relationships with clients. If those relationships can't survive honesty, they weren't strong enough to matter. She was quiet for a long moment. You've grown more than I realized, Megan. I've had good reasons to. Patricia stood and walked to my window. Sunlight filtered through the curtains Marcus had picked out, the ones I thought were too bright until I saw how they transformed our living room. I'll do it, she said finally. All 3 conditions. Then I'll come back. Just like that? I shook my head. Not just like that. I'm coming back because the mission still matters to me, because there are 43 hospitals relying on systems I helped build, because walking away meant Robert won, and I refuse to give him that. And the 31 calls you didn't answer? Those stay unanswered. Chelsea can learn from this experience the same way I learned from mine, by facing consequences and growing through them. Patricia nodded slowly. When can you start? Give me this week. I need to spend some time with my husband to remember why all this matters in the first place. That evening, Marcus and I sat on our back porch, watching the sunset paint our garden in shades of orange and gold. So you're going back, he said. Different than before. Patricia's returning. I'll have actual authority. The people who humiliated me are gone. And you feel good about it? I considered the question seriously. I feel like I'm choosing it this time, not just accepting what someone gives me. Actually choosing. Marcus squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Meg, not for going back, for everything,
how you handled this weekend, how you protected yourself without abandoning what you care about. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. You just didn't have to. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled around us. The next chapter of my career would begin soon enough. New challenges, new battles, probably new people who underestimated me. But I'd learned something important during those 72 hours. The systems I build reflect the values I hold. The boundaries I set determine how people treat me. The calls I choose not to answer speak just as loudly as the ones I take. 31 missed calls, each one a reminder that expertise matters, that safety isn't optional, that sometimes the best response to disrespect is simply refusing to participate. They threw a champagne party for my replacement while security escorted me out. 72 hours later, they begged me to return. Not because I wanted revenge, because I knew my worth, and finally, so did they. If this story resonated with something in your own experience, if you've ever been dismissed by people who didn't understand your value, hit subscribe and join us, because every day we share stories of people who refused to let others define their worth. Drop a comment telling me about a time you had to set boundaries at work. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, check out that video right there. It's another story you're definitely going to want to hear. Until next time, know your worth and never answer calls from people who celebrated your exit.